Welcome to the Turkey Hunter Podcast with me, your host, Andy Galliano. In this podcast, I share with turkey hunters just like you how to have more turkeys on your hunting property and how to have more successful turkey hunts. I teach you how to do this with tips and interviews with turkey hunting pros, wildlife management tips, and entertaining turkey hunting stories. Tune in weekly as I share proven and simple strategies to help you have more success this turkey season. Make sure to head over to www.iamturkeyhunting.com to subscribe to receive free turkey hunting tips, tactics, strategies, and product reviews. Also, please visit and like my Facebook fan page. Go to Facebook and search I Am Turkey Hunting, and also feel free to post your turkey hunting photos from this past season and let us know where and when you killed your bird. For all of you Twitter users out there, please follow me on Twitter, where my handle is @TurkeyHitman, and I will be sure to follow you back. And now, for this week's show.
Hello and welcome back to this week's episode of the Turkey Hunter Podcast. You are listening to episode number 136, an interview with the Turkey Men author, Thomas Pirot. And I am your host and the guy who almost got grounded this weekend. Okay, not really. So, my wife has some family coming in from out of town this coming weekend, and this past weekend she kind of looked around and thought that not as much stuff has gotten done around the house as what she wants. So, I had to abandon any sort of a fishing trip that I had in the works and stick around the house. But I did manage to squeeze in the building of 4 feeders over the weekend. A buddy of mine had given me 4 empty 55-gallon plastic barrels, and I have turned them into gravity feeders. So, I got a little property management project completed. That was a good thing. And of course, it's never too early because we are 287 days, 12 hours, 28 minutes, and 20 seconds away from opening day of spring turkey season in Alabama. And I want to start out today's show by doing something that I haven't done in a while, and that is to show a little bit of love to you guys who listen to the show using a different player than iTunes or Podbean. So the show has been on Stitcher Radio for quite some time, and despite that, there are only 5 reviews on Stitcher. And I know quite a few of you guys listen to the show on Stitcher. I actually listen to the podcast that I listen to using Stitcher myself. And you can leave reviews on Stitcher. So I've gotten some reviews on here that I haven't read and have not been addressed. And I want to touch on those pretty quickly because I think they're great reviews. And I want to thank my friend Ben Carlson for leaving a review on Stitcher. He says 5 stars, excellent content. When I first discovered the Turkey Hunter Podcast, I was extremely skeptical when it came to thinking of rednecks podcasting. But upon listening, there are 2 things that became very evident after a few episodes of this podcast, and they are that Andy has an incredible passion for hunting wild turkeys and that he will do whatever it takes to make his listeners better wild turkey hunters. This podcast is truly an invaluable resource for all pursuers of the longbeard. Thank you, Ben, for leaving that review. Also, I have enjoyed interacting with you on Twitter over the past, so I appreciate you very much. Also, a 5-star rating from MU Fishgrad. And the review starts out saying, "Great show. I discovered this podcast about a day or 2 ago. I listened to an episode or 2 and became hooked on it. I like to listen to this when I'm at work, and I find it entertaining and informative. I learn a lot from this, and it helps me since I'm relatively new to the world of turkey hunting with only 3 years of hunting on my own since my dad took me out when I was a kid." Thank you, Mewfishgrad. I am glad that we can help you to learn some more about the awesome sport of turkey hunting. We got another 5-star rating from Tyrion's Door. And Tyrion's Door says, "Finally, a friend to teach the sport. I started turkey hunting late And as soon as I realized how challenging the sport was, I wished I had a friend, uncle, somebody to guide me. Andy is so helpful and encouraging in his podcast that I feel like I finally found that person. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Tyrion's Door. I appreciate that. That is the whole goal in this podcast, is to help you guys out. And if I can help you to feel more comfortable or confident in the turkey woods, then I feel like it's a matter of time before the birds start to flop. So today's a big day. Today is May 31st. And I want to welcome those of you from Maine, New York, Pennsylvania, Idaho, Washington, and the other states whose spring turkey season ended this last week of May. And I want to welcome you to the Poked Out Bottom Lip Club. I hope your season ended the way that you hoped it would. And remember, next season preparations start today. So, let's get started. Part of getting us ready for next turkey season is learning all we can about wild turkeys, turkey hunting strategies and tactics, gear, calling, callers, our hunting land, etc., etc. So, some of that learning we're all going to do can and will be done right here on this podcast every single week. Some of that learning will have to be done in the woods, learning the lay of the land, learning some woodsmanship, and the habits and patterns of your turkeys on your property. And some of that learning needs to be done from textbooks. Okay, so they're not really textbooks, but they are books that are full of text. So can I get a pass on that phrase? There are lots of really good books out there that we can buy, that we can learn a great deal about our addiction from. One of those textbooks that I want you guys to add to your summer reading list is Turkey Men by Thomas Pero. Turkey Men is a book of interviews of the men who have completed the Super Slam of turkey hunting, which, as most of you know, is killing a turkey in each of the 49 states that have wild turkeys. I recently completed the book, and I can tell you without a doubt that this is a book that most of us can learn something from. Whether you are interested in pursuing a Super Slam or you're not and you just want to kill your very first turkey. Despite a very few minor editing oversights, this is a book that I highly recommend for you guys. From entertaining stories to great pictures to an author who knows how to tell a great story himself, to lots and lots of turkey hunting tips, this book has something in it for every turkey hunter of every experience level. So, while I could ramble on about how great of a book this is, I'd rather let the man who wrote it, edited it, and published it tell you about the book. So, here's Tom Pero, and I will see you guys on the other side. Hey everybody, I am glad to tell you that I have on the line with me today Tom Pero. I want to talk to Tom about his newest book that he has out that I think we're all going to be very interested in. And I met Tom at the NWTF convention. He'd actually emailed me a couple of times before the convention and mentioned his book and that he had a copy for me. So I swung by his booth, picked up a copy of the book, and that book kept me going with some reading material through turkey season. So as much as I could keep my eyes awake at night, laying in bed, I would knock off 3 or 4 pages a night, and there's no question about it. I really could have sat down, had I not been in the throes of turkey season, I could have sat down and read the book in one sitting. I enjoyed it that much. I got that much out of it. And so when I finished the book, I said, well, I need to get Tom on the show just to talk about the book. And I've got questions for him. So I think it's a great opportunity for you guys listening to get familiar with the book, to learn a little bit about Tom, and to listen to me pick his brain about some things about the book. So, Tom, thank you very much for taking time out of your day. How are you and where are you?
Sure, Andy. I'm delighted to be with you and all your listeners. I am just outside of Seattle,
Okay.
So we're a couple thousand miles apart.
Yeah.
I'm more or less in the Seattle suburbs, just slightly to the northeast of the city. And a gorgeous spring day here with a bright blue sky, so
nice.
Looking good. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you guys get very many of those?
Don't tell anybody, but from now through October, this is about the best weather in the United States.
Oh, wow. Okay, we'll keep that our secret then. Very good. So tell me a little bit about yourself, and your company is Wild River Press. Tell me a little bit about Wild River Press as well before I start picking your brain about.
Sure. Well, I'm a journalist, and that's what I went to school for, and have edited fishing and hunting publications, both magazines and books, for more than 40 years. I was the first full-time editor of Trout Unlimited way back in the late 1970s, and did that for a good long stretch. And ever since I was a kid growing up in New England, I've always fished and hunted. My hunting, which is going to probably be of most interest to your listeners, back then was mostly grouse hunting, rough grouse hunting, a little bit of pheasant hunting, and duck hunting. I used to hunt wood ducks and black ducks and out of a canoe and some decoying. So that's primarily my hunting background. I hunt a little bit now. For example, last year I was pheasant hunting in South Dakota. I've done a little bit of turkey hunting to kind of get an idea what it's about, but by no means do I consider myself an expert. I certainly enjoy myself when I get out there. But Wild River Press, to follow up, is a small, essentially custom book publishing company that I started a dozen years ago, specializing in fishing and hunting books, high quality, at least I believe they're high quality fishing and hunting books. Mm-hmm. And we've won a good many national awards for various titles we produced. And Turkey Men is a project that I've had in mind for several years, and finally just kicked it off by just about a year ago, buying a bunch of airplane tickets and traveling around visiting with turkey hunters.
Yeah, obviously we're going to dig into that more because, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like you told me that you are a die-hard fisherman.
Well, I'm primarily a fly fisherman. I've done other kinds of fishing over the years as well, but I suppose my core experience has been fly fishing. Not only was I the editor of Trout Magazine way back when, but I also have started and edited a couple of other fly fishing magazines over the years, and as a result have been able to fish all over. I've fished in the Indian Ocean, I've fished in Argentina, Iceland, all over Canada, Alaska, pretty much you name it. Anywhere there's a fish to be caught on a fly rod, I've been there.
Yeah, that's cool. So how does a fisherman get interested in the topic of turkey hunting? And really what you did was track down some of the best turkey hunters in the country and interview them. So what really was your motivation and purpose in writing Turkey Men?
Well, I won't give you too complicated an answer. The quick answer is that a number of years ago, I was writing a story about a quail and pheasant plantation in Florida hunting. Mm-hmm. And at the time, the fellow who was running this operation, it's kind of a high-end sporting club, was a guy named Jeff Buds, who is the lead interviewee in Turkey Men. And so I was chatting with him back then, this is half a dozen years ago or so, chatting with him about hunters, and I wanted to get into, I published a string of fishing books, and I wanted to get into publishing some hunting material, and thought that wild turkeys would be a likely subject. And I kind of look back on it now and laugh, because I asked him, did he know any expert turkey hunters? He kind of looked at me with a blank face, said, who do you think you're talking with? So we kind of went from there, and then he invited me to come down and experience the turkey hunt, and that's kind of how it all started. And as I said, a year ago, I've been thinking about just how to do such a book. I certainly wasn't going to haul off and pretend to be a turkey expert. And frankly, I read, half a dozen. I purchased and read a half a dozen different how-to turkey books and wasn't terribly impressed from a literary point of view, graphic point of view, and, approached it kind of the way I do most of my book projects, which is, with a little bit of hubris maybe, but, I can do better. And so I thought about it for pretty much last winter and spring and came up with this idea of using the theme of the so-called Super Slam, the achievement of killing a wild turkey in all 49 states where they exist. Places where they don't exist is Alaska. They've been introduced to Hawaii, and they breed prolifically there in certain places. And so I just thought that was a pretty remarkable feat for anybody to do, just to the endurance aspect of it, if nothing else. And I personally enjoy traveling, and just thought of it as quite the adventure, and that's what it amounts to. I just thought it would be a good way to get in the minds of these obviously very experienced hunters and get them to tell some of their stories, and in the process share some information, if not downright secrets. And that's exactly what they all did. Every individual to a man was most gracious and forthcoming. I had no idea. I mean, when I picked up the phone and started, the only guy I knew was Buds, as I said. I didn't know any of these other fellows. And I basically tracked them down. Only half of the dozen individuals I interviewed, incidentally, have, quote-unquote, officially achieved a Super Slam, meaning that they're recorded on the website of the National Wild Turkey Federation, meaning they've registered all the birds as they've gotten them over the years. Half a dozen of them, the people I interviewed, had not done that. Nonetheless, as a journalist, I wasn't going to let that stand in my way. If I, was convinced that they really did do what they said they had done, why, I felt that they deserved to be in the book as well.
Right. How long did it take you to track all these guys down that are in Volume 1 of Turkey Men?
Pretty cool. Well, I tracked them all down at once, all 12 guys. The 6 of them are in this book, and then 6 will be in Volume 2. But I actually was able to track them down pretty swiftly. I think within about a week I was able, because, again, half of them are, publicly listed on the Federation's website, so that was a pretty easy. Yeah. And then the half a dozen others, it's a pretty sprawling hunting community, as you well know better than I, spread out all across the United States, and just who knows how many, hundreds of thousands anyway of avid turkey hunters. But within this small clique, they seem to all kind of know each other, or they know of each other, and so it wasn't that big a deal. A more daunting challenge was how I was going to interview them. I've done many interviews over the phone, as you do, and that certainly would have been one way to do it. But the more I thought about it, I thought that I'd get a much more authentic view of these people, these men, if I could muster the energy and the resources to actually go visit them. And so that's ultimately what I decided to do, go sit down with every single one of them in their hunting rooms or their, across the kitchen table or whatever, and ask them to tell me their stories.
So at that point, when you started contacting them, how long did it take you from the time that you did your first interview until you said, okay, well, I've got enough content for Volume 1?
Oh, well, actually what happened was that I met with 10 of the 12 individuals in one fell swoop.
Wow.
I just bought an armload of airline tickets and started in Texas, just outside of Houston, and then just kept flying up what I now refer to as the Turkey Crescent, right? By your neck of the woods, Louisiana, Florida, right up through the Virginias and into Pennsylvania. I did that in about 3 weeks.
Wow.
And I've done a lot of traveling in my life, but I've never done anything like that. I mean, we're talking about up and down in the airplanes, jump in the rental car, drive somewhere to a motel or whatever, and then go visit with an individual or a couple of people a day after. So I was definitely on the move.
Yeah.
And then because of a slight scheduling issue, I had to go back to Indiana, where I interviewed a gentleman there, and then another fellow flew up to meet us from Georgia. And so I interviewed those two guys together. a couple of weeks later in mid-July. But I basically pulled it all off in about a month. And then I got home and I spent months transcribing the tapes and editing, etc. And it was, and I should say also that when I was visiting with these guys, I took advantage of the opportunity to cherry pick their photo albums and so on, and a lot of them, all of them really, were very cooperative, and they collected newer digital photos. But I mean, some of these guys have been hunting for decades, so they had old snapshots and a lot of very cool stuff that documented their own hunting experience. And so, I basically came home with a haul of all that material, not only the conversations, but also all these pictures. And it, I've been, as I said, I've been editing magazines and books for many, many years, and so I have a pretty good idea what's required to dig through this stuff, and it was immediately obvious to me, probably was on my airplane ride home actually, that either this thing was going to be some sort of behemoth of a doorstop book, or it was going to have to come out in a couple of volumes. Yeah. And having published a couple of those blockbuster type books of 500 or 600 pages, I just didn't think that was a good format for this particular subject, nor would most turkey hunters, I think, be willing to shell out $100 for this giant volume. So that's essentially what led me fairly quickly to the decision to come out with these published conversations, is what they really are, in a couple of phases or a couple of steps.
Yeah. So I know from experience it's pretty difficult to get a turkey hunter on the telephone during turkey season to talk about turkey hunting. But you can generally, if it's not turkey season, you can get them on the telephone to talk about turkey hunting pretty much any other time of the year, and they almost won't stop talking about it. So what time of year did you conduct these interviews, and did you find that they were pretty forthcoming with information to answer your questions?
Yeah, I did all the interviews, all my traveling and all the interviews from approximately mid-June through mid-July. So it was right after the season. I was smart enough to realize that. Yeah. But when I was rounding these guys up and with my initial phone calls, I did actually reach a couple of them in the woods and on their cell phones. That was kind of funny. Yeah. And they had to call me back. But it all worked out just fine. And I was very lucky. And in retrospect, I was very lucky that they didn't have any, big travel plans or family plans during that period. I was able to, as I said, pretty much in a orderly, chronological way, I was able to jump around and meet with all of them.
Yeah. One of the things that I really enjoyed about the interviews, and that I think you did a very good job of in the interviews, is getting to know a little bit about each hunter, what their motivation behind pursuing the Super Slam was, and then picking their brains about the process of going through that Super Slam, kind of what were the states that they had to go back and revisit, and how many states did they have to go back and revisit, and, questions like that, as well as even breaking it down to a question, and I can't remember exactly which person it was that you interviewed, and in fact, I think you may have asked the question a couple of times, but asking the people that you were interviewing, okay, which state that you've hunted did you find that the turkeys were most uncooperative in? And
oh yeah, I asked everybody that.
Yeah, and so there's just a lot of great information in there. Where did you come up with your questions for these interviews? Because I do a lot of interviews myself, and sometimes questions can be hard to come up with,
Right. Yeah, well, as I said, I'm a lifelong journalist, and so I'm fairly experienced. I think it's fair to say in conducting interviews. I've conducted interviews of many different people all around the world, primarily fishermen, but some hunters as well. And personally, I enjoy reading interviews. As I mentioned in my introduction, for all my life really, ever since I started reading, which was as a kid, I've always been drawn to interviews. I remember, the famous Playboy interviews. I remember Rolling Stone interviews, and I just find the form to be fresh and authentic. And I think if interviews are done well, whether they're as we are doing one now, or it's transcribed and appears in print, I think if interviews are done well, you really get insights into people that you wouldn't otherwise, because while polished writing is certainly something to be admired, and those of us who enjoy books and reading love well-turned phrases and so on, still there's something raw and I say almost visceral about getting an individual to sort of bare his or her soul about what drives a particular passion. And for me, with fishing and hunting, that's really at the root of it. And so that's always been a very natural, almost opening question. Why do you do this? What drives you? And that's always interesting with just about anybody. But with this crowd, with this group of individuals who have plainly spent years and years obsessively pursuing a wild turkey in all these different geographies, all these different states across the country. It's even, to me, it was even more fascinating. And so, that was pretty much the basis for the whole thing. Why did you guys do this? And I got quite a range of answers. They weren't all exactly the same answers. Several of them started out to do it early on. Several other individuals kind of backed their way into it. Mm-hmm. One guy from Pennsylvania, for example, said that it hadn't even occurred to him till he got about halfway there, and then his wife said, why don't you just get all of them? And then he sort of, put his head into the wind and actually started purposefully, charting that course and figuring out where the pins were going to go in the map next.
Yeah. All right. So you mentioned something just a minute ago that I find pretty interesting. And correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't you just say that you actually read the interviews in Playboy magazine?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I can legitimately say with a straight face that I actually read those interviews. I remember reading interviews with John Lennon, Jimmy Carter, way back in the day in the 70s, and that was great journalism. Playboy was great journalism. A lot of people, may laugh about that now, but they had the resources to hire the best journalists in the world, and spend back when a dollar was a real dollar. I mean, they'd pay like Norman Mailer $10,000 to write a story, But in other places as well, it is a little bit funny saying that, I suppose.
Well, I'm just glad to know that I've met someone who actually read interviews and articles in the magazine. So that's good to know. Very interesting. Okay, so just, I guess, think back over the interviews, and it's been a while since you've done them, so I'm not expecting you to know everything from every interview. But while you're doing those interviews and you're talking to these guys that are just absolutely obsessed with turkey hunting, was there one common trait that you saw in each one of those hunters that you think makes them so good at what they enjoy doing? Okay, so that is all that I have for you guys for the free episode this week. If you would like to hear the remainder of the interview, then you will need to subscribe to the show. And in order to subscribe to the show, all you need to do is text the word Turkey Hunter. I know it's 2 words, but make it 1 word. Turkey Hunter with no spaces. Text that to the number 44222. I will reply back to your text message and ask you to reply with only your email address. Once you do that, I will email you a direct link that you can click on, even on your mobile device, where you'll be taken to a website where you can create a username and a password and charge the $12 subscription to a credit card, and at that point in time, your username and password will be activated, and you can enter that into the Podbean application on your mobile device, and you can listen to the full episode, the premium episode of the Turkey Hunter podcast each and every week for the next 52 weeks, and you'll also get all of the past premium content as well. Subscribing is easy, and I'm pretty sure you'll feel like you're getting your money's worth with this investment. So I'm not going to belabor the fact that I think that this book, Turkey Men, is one that you will not be disappointed in purchasing. So I'm going to move on, and I'm going to tell you guys that I'm calling it a show this week. But before I cut you loose, I'm going to ask you for two little favors this week. Number one, if you do buy a book from Tom, and you can do that by going to turkeymen.com, then please let him know that you learned about his book on this show. You know, I get nothing from the sale of these books except knowing that if you buy one, you'll learn something from the book about turkeys and or turkey hunting. And really, that's all I care about. Number two, if you would, if you haven't done so already, leave me a review on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Google Play Music, or Podbean. Doing that would be doing me a solid favor, and I would much appreciate it. That's it. That's all for this week. Thank you guys so much for tuning in this week. I know that you have choices. I appreciate you spending your time with us. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. Goodbye.
Thanks for tuning in. You were just listening to the Turkey Hunter podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please go on over to iTunes and leave a 5-star review. And make sure to head over to www.iamturkeyhunting.com to subscribe for free turkey hunting tips, tactics, strategies, and product reviews to help you have a more successful turkey season. And stay tuned for upcoming episodes on hunting afternoon birds, how to film your hunt, and the breeding cycle of hens, as well as some guest interviews. Thanks again for listening. We know your time is valuable, and we appreciate you sharing some of it with us. See you next week.